The Detroit Lions pick number 2 overall and 32nd as well as a result of the Matthew Stafford trade with the Rams. When you look at this team, Traps, what are their biggest needs? I mean, I think 2 is like the quarterback question at 2 is really, really fascinating, and at 32. And like the Lions kind of dictate, if we assume Aiden Hutchinson goes 1, the Lions essentially dictate how the rest of the top 10 is going to play out with their selection. How do you think, what do you think the Lions need, and which prospects could they be targeting?
Okay, if I'm Brad Holmes, the Lions GM, I'm picking a quarterback at 2 way before I'm picking one at 32. And that's just not just because how those picks align. Because at 32, even if you have an inkling or think that Sam Howell might be good down the road, Matt Corral, the chances that he's going to end up being that much better than what you have in Jared Goff, I think is relatively small compared to what you could get with Malik Willis at 2. Now, I've been on the Willis bandwagon since like January, so I may be a little biased with this, but I just think if you're picking inside the top 3 or top 5 and you like your quarterback that you have as a starter, kind of a stopgap, but you have a possible franchise changer, you don't know and don't really want to be picking inside the top 3 in the near future. And if you are, you might not have a job if you're a GM. So I think it's got to be Malik Willis at 2, wide receiver later. And then just looking at their entire roster, it's got to be something on defense. I think their offensive line for being a bottom tier team is not really that bad. I like what Amon-Ra St. Brown did, obviously, last year out of the slot. They still need to add that position. Jeffrey Okudah is kind of a mystery at this point to be a number 3 overall pick. Terrible rookie season, and then tears his Achilles early in his second year. They could go corner. They could go edge rusher. They don't really have anything at that position. Defensive tackle, linebacker. I know I've mocked Nakobe Dean to them at 32 quite often if he falls a little bit. But to me, it's almost not a no-brainer, but very close that if they like Malik Willis, it would be the perfect scenario on Dan Campbell's team to sit behind Jared Goff, maybe halfway through or 2/3 of the way through his rookie season, maybe his entire rookie season, he's on the bench and then takes over for Jared Goff eventually.
Let's say you, Josh, you think, and look, I don't disagree at all. If you are that high on Malik Willis, because he ain't making it to 32, right?
No.
Like if you were that high on Malik Willis and you believe it with a year on the bench, and like, I do think the Lions will be stable enough, which sounds
exactly
like a stupid way to start a sentence. Like I do think the Lions.
I know what you mean.
No, maybe like I think the Lions will be patient. Like Chris Spielman has ownership and management's ear, and he is aligned with Dan Campbell, and so I think that this team will be patient enough with the coaching staff and with the development of a quarterback and the offensive staff that if they want to sit Malik Willis for a full year, they'll just play Jared Goff and it won't be a big deal, and they won't worry about rushing Malik Willis out there. Do you think 2 is a good spot for Willis, Josh, or are you eyeing other prospects that fit for the Lions?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like Detroit's roster on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, they still need to upgrade the wide receiver position, but in terms of situations that Malik Willis could walk into, that's far from the worst. I mean, he could absolutely do worse, based on being able to sit behind Jared Goff for a year. He's got a good offensive line. You've got some good, offensive skill talents with TJ Hawkinson, DeAndre Swift, Amon-Ra St. Brown. So there are absolutely worse situations that he could walk into. Now, I think it is a bit uncomfortable because I don't value him that highly. But at the same time, if the team has a conviction that he is that type of player, then you absolutely have to take him at number 2 overall. You may take a little bit of heat in the moments, but if it works out, it's not going to matter. Nobody's going to fault you for giving up the number 2 overall pick if it works out. I think back to John Dorsey when he was the general manager of the Browns. It was not popular that he chose Baker Mayfield number 1 overall, but he did because he had a conviction about the player. So if you have a similar conviction about, and John Dorsey's with Detroit, that's why that's relevant. But
that was not a Baker Mayfield worked out. That's
right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So if you have a conviction about the player, then take him at number 2 overall by all means. If you don't go in the direction of a quarterback, for me, I think, Cincinnati's Ahmad Gardner is the top overall prospect for me right now. And, I say that with the caveat.
In the whole draft.
In the whole draft. Yeah. I mean, nice. I love him, but at the same time, I say it with the caveat that I wish I could start my rankings at number 3 this year instead of number 1, because I think we just missed that top overall talent the way that we've seen in previous years. So I don't think Detroit would take a corner that early, but I would definitely be intrigued to take a cornerback early on day 2, maybe late day 1. And then some other guys that could possibly be of interest: Trayvon Walker, the edge rusher from Georgia, Kayvon Thibodeau, Aiden Hutchinson, obviously, if he's still available, is going to be probably a home run for Detroit.
Yeah. The Sauce Gardner thing too is really interesting because you just don't see cornerbacks taken that high, and you can make the argument about positional value and whatnot. But like and I agree with you on the top end talent. Like you that's a great point. That's a great line. You should be using that anytime you like talk anywhere. It's like, I wish I could start my rankings at 3 because. But like if that class, and I agree with you, and we'll see how it bears out in a couple of years if that's actually the case and there isn't top end talent. But like if that's the case, I don't think anybody should be afraid to take a cornerback earlier than normal. If you could, like, if you think Sauce Gardner is the best player on the board and you would take him at 5, but you wouldn't take him at 2, like you're not thinking with your head on straight, right? I mean, if you're like, well, we're at 2, so we have to take Malik Willis or like Kayvon Thibodeau or Walker because you can't take a cornerback in the top 5. People said that stuff when the Colts drafted Quentin Nelson, right? And he is a perennial All-Pro and a difference maker on their offensive line. So if you can get an elite player who you believe is great, screw positional value or whatever. I just take him there. So I think that's something, especially in this particular draft.